Real quick, we've just released another set of enamel pins. We finally got Zeus and Hera ready to go, brought together by their mutual dislike of Jason, and I'm honestly really happy with how these ones turned out, so check out the link to our crowdmade shop and snag a set before they're gone. I don't think it's exactly controversial to suggest that Greek mythology is a bit lacking in the nuanced female characters department. The goddesses have their fair share of personality, and you do get the occasional anomalous powerhouse like Atalanta and Kirke, but for the most part, the ladies of Greek mythology are fairly one-note. Queens who mother heroes, princesses who fall in love with heroes, random targets of divine retribution, Zeus's girlfriend of the week, not a whole lot of variety, and certainly not much in the depth department. Usually the most interesting thing about these women is either what hero they boinked or how they died. Nice to know modern media is really sticking to its roots on that one. But there's one crowning exception to the rule, and that is Medea. Granddaughter of Helios, princess of Colchis, powerful sorceress, and somewhere in the gray area between girl boss and supervillain, Medea is anything but boring. She shows up off and on through later Greek mythology, but her story is mostly codified in two texts. First, the Argonautica, a Greek epic poem from the 200s BCE, written by Apollonius Rhodes and based off the well-known Hellenistic mythology of the time. And second, Medea, a tragic play written earlier by Euripides around 431 BCE. The first half of her life is an epic, the second half is a tragedy. I think we can safely assume this story is gonna have some twists in it. Now, this video is not about the Argonautica, it's about Medea, so we're gonna play a little fast and loose with this summary until our leading lady hits the stage. Got it? Good. Now, the events of the Argonautica take place a few decades before the Trojan War. This is the previous generation of heroes before the Iliad and the Odyssey. So the Argonautica is mostly about Jason, Prince of Thessaly, whose father Aeson was overthrown by his treacherous half-brother Peleus, who kills all of Aeson's descendants except for Jason, who's smuggled out to be raised by the centaur Chiron. Many years later, Jason returns to Thessaly to claim his rightful throne and runs into an old lady who needs help getting across a river. Jason carries her across, losing a sandal in the process, but gaining something very valuable in return, the favor of Hera, who it turns out was the old woman all along. From this point on, Hera regularly intervenes with subtle acts of divine intervention to help her boy out. Jason arrives at the palace and demands Peleus gives him his rightful throne, but Peleus hits him with the classic "hey kid, you like proving yourself" maneuver and sends Jason on a quest to retrieve the Golden Fleece, a textbook MacGuffin that could have been literally anything. Jason assembles a crack team of heroes called the Argonauts, and they set sail on the Argo for Colchis, where the Golden Fleece is stowed. The exact crew kinda depends on who you ask. Every version of the story has a different set of heroes on board. Sometimes Atalanta's around, sometimes Jason decreed the Argo is strictly no girls allowed zone, sometimes Theseus and Pirithous are there, sometimes they're already stuck in Hades for the crime of being absolute morons. Heracles is usually on board, but amusingly, he gets totally ditched early on, and they keep having near misses for the rest of the book without ever meeting back up again. The cast list doesn't really matter. This is basically just an excuse to let an ensemble cast of heroes deal with a bunch of weird island shit for a while. So after a lot of filler, they eventually reach the kingdom of Colchis, where the Golden Fleece is held. But unfortunately, Colchis is ruled by a different, unrelated evil king named Aeetes, who also hits Jason with the patented "hey kid, you like proving yourself" gambit, and sets him a series of tasks to do before he gets the fleece. First he'll have to yoke a field full of deadly fire-breathing oxen, and then use them to plow the field, then he'll need to sow the field with dragon's teeth, and finally defeat an army of warriors. Jason's not too optimistic about his prospects, so he and the Argonauts head off to discuss their options. But fortunately for Jason, Aeetes has a sexy sorceress daughter named Medea, and with a little nudging from Hera, Eros hits her with the arrow of love. Suddenly head over heels for this handsome stranger, Medea finds herself utterly tormented by this new conflict of interests. She desperately wants to help Jason out, but she hates the thought of betraying her father, and she's pretty scared of what he might do to her if he finds out she's been involved. Hera sends her dreams where Jason came to her kingdom not for the Golden Fleece, but for her hand in marriage, but when she chooses him over her family and accomplishes his impossible tasks for him, her family is enraged. She wakes up, conflicted almost to the point of suicide, but while she's absolutely terrified of dying in disgrace, known to the world only as a foolish woman who gave up everything for a stranger, she eventually steals her resolve and decides to help Jason out, because love. She arranges for a covert meeting at the Temple of Hecate, where she serves as a priestess, tricking her handmaidens into thinking she's only pretending to like Jason so she can sabotage his success with evil magic. When Jason arrives, they awkwardly blush for a hot minute before Jason explains that he knows she's his only hope of success, and if she helps him, he'll make sure she's famous throughout Greece for her heroism. He compares her to Ariadne helping Theseus through the Minotaur's maze, and smitten by his praise, Medea gives him a potion called the Charm of Prometheus that'll make him invulnerable. She also explains how to handle the other challenges. Anyway, the day arrives, and Jason heads to the field, where, currently invulnerable thanks to Medea's potion, he easily yokes the fire-breathing bulls and sows the field with dragon's teeth. After a quick snack break, he returns to find an army of warriors have sprouted from the dragon's teeth, and recalling Medea's advice, he chucks a rock at them, and all the warriors get confused and pissed off, thinking one of them did it, and then they all kill each other. With the tasks completed, Jason's riding pretty high, and King Aeetes is baffled that Jason Jason managed to pull it off. That night, Hera sends Medea nightmares to warn her that Aietes has figured out her involvement, and Medea wakes up and runs into the night, arriving at the Argo and telling them they gotta get out of there right this minute and also please take her with them. Jason promises to do her one better and marry her the minute they get back to Greece. They obviously need to grab the golden fleece first, so Medea charms the dragon guarding it to sleep while Jason retrieves the fleece. Then they get the heck out of Dodge. The Colchians obviously give chase, with one of the fleets led by Medea's brother Absyrtus, and Jason and Medea come up with a cunning plan to deal with him. It's murder. The plan is murder. They lure him into a trap and Jason dismembers him. Now Zeus gets pretty pissed about this whole family murder thing, so he curses the voyage to get all turned around and confused by the wind. So the journey home ends up taking a lot longer than expected, although that's partially resolved when they end up blowing ashore on Kirke's island and she magically cleanses Medea and Jason of the guilt for the murder. Didn't know she could do that. Useful. A few more filler arcs happen while they sail home, and Jason and Medea end up getting properly married on an island, so Medea won't be sent back to Colchis by the king of the island, who's a pretty nice guy and won't break up a properly married couple. Jason and Medea are married in a sacred cave on the cliffside and take a nice little wedding night nap on top of the Golden Fleece, which I will admit was not a detail I was expecting to read in this ancient Greek epic. Yeah, Peleus, I don't know if you're going to want to touch that. So after a long and complicated voyage home, the lovers finally return to Thessaly. Now that's around where the Argonautica peters out, but the story's not over. The next bit is recounted in a short, now lost play by Euripides called the Pleiades. Now obviously Peleus doesn't want to give up the throne, proving himself be damned. He's also gone ahead and killed all of Jason's relatives just to, be proactive. But don't worry, Medea has a solution. It's murder. The solution is murder. She shows Peleus' daughters a cool spell she knows for rejuvenation by butchering an old ram and throwing the pieces into a boiling pot of herbs, at which point a young and healthy lamb jumps out. The daughters think that's really cool, so they go grab their dad and butcher him, and he's dead. He's just dead. Oops. So that's basically the first half of Medea's story. A young, demure, love-struck woman falls head over heels for a handsome, heroic stranger and gives up everything to save him from an impossible situation, and then he rescues her from her vengeful family and brings her to a better land to marry him and live happily ever after. That is a beautiful, classic, textbook love story plus or minus a couple murders. So why is the play Medea a tragedy? Buckle up, it's actually kind of fascinating. So to start us off, Jason has a bit of a problem. See, what with the whole gruesome death of Peleus and all, Jason is now an accessory to a crime, and he can't really claim the throne of Thessaly, little known downside to solving all your problems with murder. So he and Medea decide to head to Corinth instead. A few years evidently pass and they make a home there, but Jason ends up courting Glauce, princess of Corinth and daughter of King Creon, in the hopes that marrying her will make him royalty and ensure the future of his line, as well as the safety of Medea and their 2 children, because by the way, they have 2 children now. Now this is, what's the word? Adultery! That's right. Jason is married to Medea, both in the eyes of the law and the gods, and now he's trying to marry this Corinthian princess for the perks. Medea is understandably furious and has been completely inconsolable with grief and rage for long enough that King Creon is starting to get worried she might end up doing something drastic, like, just spitballing here, murder. So he decides he should exile her and her children so she can't do any murdering. She successfully pleads with him to give her one more day to get her affairs in order before he exiles her, and he agrees, which is unwise because now he's given her 24 hours to get all that murdering out of her system. But Medea isn't stupid. We've already seen how clever she is and how carefully she arranges her exit strategies. We also already know from the Argonautica that her worst fear is being abandoned and suffering the humiliation of sacrificing everything for a stranger who doesn't even care about her. She definitely wants revenge, but she knows she can't just start willy-nilly murdering people. Then she'll still be abandoned and also wanted for murder. While she's pondering this conundrum, Jason shows up to tell her that if she'd just been cool about him ditching her for this new woman, she wouldn't be getting exiled right now. Medea enumerates the many ways she's saved his ass in the past and accuses him of denying his oaths to the gods, which sets up a pretty interesting theme in this story of Medea's actions, no matter how murdery, having the tacit approval of the gods. More on that later. Anyway, Medea points out that exile is almost a death sentence because she's made enemies everywhere by constantly helping out Jason, who has a habit of pissing people off and then requiring magical assistance. And Jason counters that really she got more than she gave in that bargain because, sure, she sacrificed her family and homeland to do his impossible tasks for him and saved his life over and over again. But hey, now she gets to live in Greece, not that icky barbarian place she came from. And also, she's famous now because of all that cool stuff she did for him that he got to take the credit for. Besides, Medea's just some barbarian woman with phenomenal cosmic powers. Jason can't pass up a real princess. His genius plan was to keep Medea as his mistress when he marries the princess so he could get them some sweet royal protection, and then eventually Medea's lame, not royal kids will have some properly royal half-siblings. Isn't that lovely? Unfortunately, Medea getting herself exiled has spoiled his brilliant plan somewhat, but don't worry, he's totally willing to give her some money to make that whole wandering the wasteland with 2 young children thing easier. Oh man, I want to see her kill him so bad. So Jason leaves, and when Medea heads outside to think, she runs into Aegeus, king of Athens, who greets her like an old friend. Apparently he's in town because he wanted to ask the oracle why his wiener doesn't work, but when he sees Medea looking so down, he asks what's wrong, and she fills him in on Jason being the absolute worst. He's totally sympathetic and offers her sanctuary in Athens, though he does say say he can't actually get her there, she'll have to make her own way over. Medea, cautious as ever, tells him she's made quite a lot of enemies and she needs to know he'll be willing to protect her from, I don't know, retribution or something? He promises, and with her exit strategy firmly in place, Medea gets down to the brass tacks of plotting a murder. So Medea takes a beautiful golden gown and coronet, two gifts from Helios, and applies a poison to them so potent that it won't just kill whoever wears them, it'll also kill anyone that person touches. She also ponders killing her kids, reasoning that'll hurt Jason pretty bad, although the chorus points out it'll also hurt her a lot more, since Jason is kind of a terrible dad who doesn't really like them that much, but Medea decides it's worth it. I mean, it wouldn't be the first family she's murdered. Anyway, she calls Jason back in and pretends to be all remorseful about their argument, and Jason totally buys it because he knows women tend to get emotional when their husbands leave them for other women. Medea tells him she hates the thought of their poor children sharing her exile, and couldn't he possibly convince Creon to let them stay? Jason's not sure about Creon, but he thinks he can convince Glaucia to do it, what with her being a woman and thus dumb and emotional and stuff. Medea gives the gown and coronet to her kids and tells them to be very convincing and persuade Glaucia to let them stay by giving her these wedding gifts. She sends them off, and evidently they're very persuasive because they come back without the presents. Medea suffers from a brief internal conflict over murdering them, and then a messenger arrives in a panic telling her to get the hell out of Dodge because everyone's dead and they're definitely gonna blame her. He's probably not expecting Medea to respond, "Ooh, spill the tea! Did she suffer? Tell me she suffered." So apparently when the kids showed up, everyone was excited because it meant Medea was maybe getting over her grudge. Everyone except for Glaucia, who refused to even look at them until they showed her the shiny presents. She immediately put them on, stumbled around for a bit, and then caught fire. It's a hell of a poison. So she dies, and Creon cradles her body, at which point he also dies. Whoopsies. The messenger books it, and Medea decides this at least makes the whole child murder thing easier, since killing the entire royal family of Corinth is gonna get them killed anyway. She heads discreetly off stage, and the kids yell about how they are very definitely getting murdered right now, which is when Jason shows up, loudly talking about how he sure hopes nobody kills the kids to retaliate against him. Ooh. Poor timing. So Medea rises out of the house and into the air in Helios' flying chariot, using a bit of stagecraft usually reserved for the gods, by the way, and she taunts Jason that he'll never reach her up here, and she's successfully taken everything from him. Jason yells about how he probably should have taken Medea's willingness to betray her family for him as a red flag. He also says that the souls of their children will avenge him on her, but Medea says the gods know who really messed up in this situation, and she's gonna go bury their kids in Hera's sacred lands before purifying herself of the crime, presumably with Kirke's help again, and then heading to Athens for a nice long nap. And meanwhile, she prophesizes that Jason's gonna die a miserable death crushed under the ruins of his only heroic achievement. Jason swears that an avenging fury will destroy her, and Medea tells him good luck finding one that'll listen to a liar and an oathbreaker, and flies away. Jason leaves, asking the gods to avenge him, and the play closes out with the chorus singing that the gods don't always give us what we want. Honestly, hilarious. Sure enough, Medea remains conspicuously unsmote and makes sporadic appearances in later mythology, heading to Athens and marrying Aegeus fairly happily until his son Theseus shows up and she tries to kill him a little bit and runs off to a nebulous faraway land. Medea quietly vanishes into the mythos, never even canonically dying. Her story seems to vindicate that despite all the familicide and the poisoning and stuff, she really did retain the favor of the gods right up to the end, framing her as a bizarrely morally nuanced figure. And in contrast, Jason, well, things really don't go so hot for Jason. As you may recall, his whole hero's journey really got started when he won the favor of Hera through that secret test of character thing. She was essentially his patron god, and basically the only reason he passed all those proving himself dealios, as well as the only reason Medea falls in love with him. Well, Hera was the goddess of marriage and family, and then Jason betrayed his wife. Medea wasn't just sassing when she called him an oathbreaker, he was quite literally breaking a divine oath by abandoning her and their children. Without the favor of Hera, Jason dies alone and unhappy when the rotting prow of the Argo breaks off and crushes him in his sleep, a crumbling monument to his only heroic achievement. Jason and Medea are a classic tragedy that hits surprisingly hard. They were in love, they were heroes, they did incredible things, and then when the situation changed, their very human flaws tore them apart. Two characters who were heroes in one context become nightmares in another. Reading the Argonautica is a genuinely very weird experience, seeing the beginning of their relationship knowing how terribly it's going to end, and you can kind of tell it was written with that in mind. There are a few little tidbits of Medea's character that seem like they're deliberately written there to make the impact of the original tragedy hit harder. Jason could have never succeeded in his quest without Medea, but because of all the murderiness of Medea's methods, he ended up failing to win the throne he'd been after in the first place, driving him to further extremes to try and claim the royalty he deserved. Jason loved Medea, but not more than he wanted the future he'd been after, and in casting her aside, he made a terrible enemy. And Medea was always brilliantly clever, and she loved Jason very fiercely. She had no other choice thanks to Hera, and she loved their children in a way Jason didn't. Throughout the play, he only ever calls them her children children until they're dead, and then suddenly they're his children and he feels really bad about it. In a better time, in a better situation, they probably could have been happy together for the rest of their lives, if only Jason weren't such an absolute dingus. Oh yeah, I'll just ditch my incredibly cunning and powerful sorceress wife for this random princess. I'm sure she'll be cool with it. What could possibly go wrong?
But on the wind and the rain, a strange new perfume blows, and the lightning flashes in her eyes, and he knows that she knows, and the thunder rolls